pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. Jesse, if you'll go through the roll call.
Acting Chair, Member Clark.
Present.
Member Horning. And I did hear from Mrs. Horning. She will have an excused absence this evening. Member Urban.
Here.
And we want to welcome you to the board.
Thanks for having me.
Member Bryant. Absent. Member Lamug.
Here.
Member Stark.
Here.
Member Jones.
Here.
Member Gershenlauer. He has an unexcused absence. He told me last week he would be here, so I'm not sure why he's not present this evening. Member Day. Oh, you're Member Day. Yes. You're right over here.
If you walk over this way, one of the two name tags should have your name, and that's where you can sit.
Yes, you're right there on the end. Perfect. I'm sorry, I thought you were part of the public. You're coming for public comment.
Because I'm an alternate, so I wasn't sure.
Yes, no, yes, ma'am. Have a seat and welcome.
As alternate, you get a seat at the table. All right. So
If Bob, she will. Yeah, she
So-
will be a voting member tonight.
yep, but we have quorum.
We do.
All right. So we've got Andre Anderson as the staff representative, and I believe you're Sydney, correct? Yes, sir. All right. Welcome, everyone. Andre, I'll leave the podium to you.
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. First, I want to thank you all for serving this board. I know it takes a lot of your day to do this from your regular jobs, and we really do appreciate the time you spend with us. And also want to welcome the new members on our board tonight, and also the board members that were reappointed, who obviously like this board so much. So we, again, appreciate that for you being here. I just wanted to introduce to you Sydney Kendrick. She is a planner in our office, and as you well know, we, Annie resigned, and so we are trying to find a replacement. So for the interim, we are asking Sydney to step in and to fill that role. I will be assisting as well, so you probably see me a little more than normal, and kind of help walk you through the process. There was a lot of items that you've had identified over the year that we need to get back on task. One of which is the next item, which is the nomination and election of a chairperson and also for a vice chair. This is normally done according to our bylaws in January, but I think the board decided to wait until new members came on board and do it at that time. So I'll turn it back over to you, acting chair, and
Acting
you
chair,
can
yeah.
accept nominations.
I don't remember when we went through the nominations before, but I guess I'll open the floor for nominations for the chairperson.
Well, I'll move to nominate you, Richard, for the chair.
And I'll second the motion.
All right, are there any other nominations?
No.
All those in favor of myself, Richard Clark, as becoming the chair, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, likewise? All right. So that takes care of the chair position. We also have a nomination for the vice chair, who basically does the job of the chair if the chair is absent. So do I have a nomination for a chairperson?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to nominate Paula Stark for vice chair.
I have a nomination of Paula. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Urban. All right. Any other nominations? If not, we'll close that. All those in favor of vice chair being Member Stark signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise? All right. Welcome, Paula, as vice chair. So she'll make sure I'm not sick.
That's true. And you're only a block away.
You're going to be here. All right, thank you very much. That takes care of the opening business items. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our February 22nd meeting. I'll entertain a motion in regards to the minutes.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written and presented signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise? All right. February 22nd, 2021 minutes have been approved as presented.
And Chair Clark, if I may, and to our new members, because of the echo and the building that we're in, just make sure you're, any motions or anything, you're announcing those clearly, and, because we have to get everything on record. So, and Ms. Day, if I may, your motion, because I'm sorry, I can't see you, but you did make your motions, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I mean, not your motions, I'm sorry, but
Your
your
votes.
vote. Yes.
All right. That takes us to old business. Welcome, Bobby. Old business, which the first one on the old business is the project review and a ranking, which Annie had, prior to her leaving, had provided us a list, and which is on the fourth page of your agenda packet.
And again, member, Chair Clark, if I may, I just want to announce that member Bryant arrived at 6:09 PM.
Sorry, I was stuck in traffic.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion that anyone wants to bring up at this time in regards to the list of projects or the project review and ranking?
No, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we approved this as presented, right,
Yes.
Andre?
Yes.
The last time Annie was here, I think.
We
Yes.
did.
Isn't that right, Jesse? Yeah.
I believe so. I think we just wanted to bring this and just make sure there,
The new
everything was
members have it.
clear. Yeah, and the new members had a chance to review it as well and
Right.
provide input.
So if I may, I'd like to make a comment on the list. I'm reviewing it for the first time in a little more detail. And one thing that I did not see on here is the tax exemption program that is in our ordinance. And it's something that we have in our ordinance, but we've not actually developed or implemented. And we currently have one person in the downtown that's trying to seek that abatement. And we just need to get that developed. It's really a state program, but we just need to develop the steps for that. So we'll need to bring that back. And that's one of those items that I'd ask that this be kind of moved up the priority ranking, because it's been missing for a while.
So where, Andre, do you think that should fit in the,
Oh, it needs to be 2021. It needs to be this year.
okay.
So it'd be up under it'd be number 2A.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be sooner than later.
Yeah. Does staff have anything at this time as far as to present to us to try and work through that, or what we need to do?
No,
or-
I didn't come prepared to talk about that
Okay.
particular program, just mentioned that it needs to be on the list of items to address, so we will begin working on that and bring something back for you to look at.
I'll entertain a motion to,
So moved.
Second.
we have a motion to go ahead and add the tax exemption ordinance working document together onto our list of projects and placing that up into the ranking for 2021. All those in favor of said motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Jesse, if you will please add that to the list of projects and ranking, and we can work towards with staff and that to get that addressed. Thank you, Andre. Sure. Was there anything else in regards to the projects review and ranking that anybody wanted to discuss? Okay. Next item will be the CLG annual report, and I'm not sure why that was on here, but
I'll tell you why. I put that on there. I just wanted, again, to make sure that the new members were aware of it. And I think Jesse provided you a link to our FTP site so you can review the document there. So that was really the purpose. It was submitted to the state because we are a certified local government. We're required to do this report. And so I just want to bring it to everyone's attention that there is accessible through our FTP site.
okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Tony?
I have a question for Mr. Anderson. Do we have to do training again this year?
So you are a board. So yeah, you'll have to go, I think, through ethics training like other boards.
I thought we had to do it every year.
Yes. I will confirm with our city attorney, but I think you are one of a regular quasi-judicial board, so yes, you will have to go through ethics training.
Okay, I thought
I
that
think
was
it's
part
4
of the
hours.
CLG
And I
requirement.
think, well, it's also part of the Florida and the Sunshine requirement as well. But I think the city attorney has set it up to be two-hour trainings rather than one long 4-hour training.
That would be nice.
Yes,
That's what I
it's shorter.
remember.
A little less
Yes.
pain agony on the Zoom interface, yeah.
Yes. So yes, we will get that information to you.
Thank you.
I know that Jesse sent out the link to the box, or the box
wonderful.
link. So did all the members get that in their email?
Yes.
So then those documents are available to you to review.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Andre. And the next would be the Historic Preservation Board bylaws.
Yes, I brought this forward again for the benefit of the new members, but also to entertain any changes or revisions to that. If you recall, when we first established this board, the city attorney had the opinion that it was not necessary for you to have bylaws since our ordinance was so specific. However, you still chose to have a set of bylaws, which again is required by the CLG anyway. And so you have the opportunity to make tweaks or changes to it as far as number of meeting times and voting and so on. So again, it's open to you to suggest changes. And I think Member Jones had something she wanted to
Yes.
discuss.
I believe she wanted to bring up something in regards to that, so.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Anderson
Yes, ma'am.
and board members, on page 3, in the second paragraph from the top, where it talks basically about the duties of the chairperson and vice chairperson, and if one of them is absent, in in that paragraph, it talks, actually, it's in the paragraph below it, it says, in the absence of both the chairperson and the vice chairperson at a meeting, provided there is a quorum, the member with the lowest seat number per the councilperson who nominated that person to the board shall assume the position of the chairperson to govern that meeting only. And when I read that, I got to thinking, that person with the lowest number, it's always going to be number 1. And it's always going to be the person that's appointed by, the mayor. And it just so happens this year, that person that has seat number 1 is a brand new member. And if that situation should arise, I'm not sure it would be putting that member in a good position to chair a meeting, especially if it was a meeting where board members may be making a lot of amendments to a document. And I just thought there might be another way to, if they're both gone, and they better not be, but if they're both gone, of the people that are present, choosing a member of those people present being the chair for that meeting only.
While I'm not an attorney, I don't suspect that that recommendation is a bad one. I think it's a reasonable recommendation to have the members present because it is in your bylaws, so you can amend your bylaws as you wish, provided it's not in conflict with the organizing ordinance that was established. And in the ordinance, I don't think it speaks to that specificity of meetings and whether a vice chair and chair is absent. So again, you can make a change in that vein, and if it's determined to be invalid, we will let you know when we have consultation with our
I would
attorney.
like to hear some discussion about the idea from fellow board members. I'm just great, when I read through these bylaws after Ms. Light put these in that Dropbox, by the way, I read every document you deposited from beginning to end, and that was the one thing that really stuck out to me, because I felt that it was just kind of arbitrary.
I mean, from a standpoint of the chair, you're basically just running the meeting. So, you know, you're following Robert's rules. You're going to be guided by staff regardless. When Doug took over the chair, he wasn't really well familiar with being a chair. He made a few mistakes, like we all do. But, you know, it's a learning process. But it's not anything that's that critical from a standpoint of if you're actually missing your chair and your vice chair, you may not even be able to make quorum as far as to do official motions, depending on whether or not everybody else is, all your alternates show up.
So you think it's fine the way it is?
I think it's fine the way that it's written.
Okay.
I mean, the lowest number of people can, just, review Robert's rules before they come to a meeting, and the whole time they can pray that the chair and the vice chair show up.
Well, and there are enough other people around the table that can pipe in and correct things.
The chair is just acting as kind of the focal director in this case. It's not.
That just means Jesse has to keep up with who's in the first chair. Because we all, a meeting or two ago, looked around and like, oh, which seat are we on?
Well, that's why she's been nice to make sure that the numbers are, on the roll call, which, thank you very much.
I'm going to get you a baton, Mr. Clark.
Beg your
I'm
pardon?
going to get you a baton.
Thank you.
Then I'll just drop it.
All right, that's fine. It's recorded. I mean, it's your concerns are noted. I mean, unless somebody else is coming up and saying, no, I don't ever want to do it. I mean, it's one of those learning experiences. As we've all, gotten into this at some point in time. We were the first ones to have to learn how to deal with Robert's rules, and
I dealt with a lot of Robert's rules.
and it scares people, but it's just organization. All right. Are there any other concerns or items to be brought up in regards to the bylaws?
For me.
Yes, Bobby.
I just wanted to revisit this and make sure that we're still okay. Now that we have the list of the ranks and the things that we're going to be doing and going forward, we do have quite a task list here. And I do just want to revisit and make sure we're still okay with the frequency. I think, we've been on this board now for about 3 years, and to start going through this, are we still okay with the frequency, or do you guys think that we should be meeting more so we can be tackling some of these things?
Well, I mean, the frequency is a minimum 6. So if we need more, obviously we can do more. And part of it is going to, be dependent on staff, because staff is the one that gets to organize and basically do the grunt work, bring it to us so that, we can give our opinions and directions. So if staff gets it done faster and says, hey, we're ready for this and we'd like to have a meeting, obviously we can add a meeting on to address it, especially since Andres brought up the issue with the, and I wrote it down.
Tax abatement.
On the tax, yeah. So, that item obviously is something that you're going to probably be pushing, and we may be looking at it before the next meeting that's scheduled, and so we may have an extra meeting scheduled.
Well, I think Bobby has a valid point, though. I mean, Andre, how do you, especially under the current circumstances, I mean, we now have Sydney, and then we're going to be transitioning
Yes.
again.
So we're thankful that the economy has turned and it's gotten better, but the downside is that we also lose staff to other industries, and we just lost another planner. So we're down a staff member again. So it's always a constant challenge to keep qualified planners on staff. So I would respectfully request that we keep 6 meetings, and then if we need to hold extra meetings, that we just do that, because you still have the discretion to hold as special meetings anyway, rather than set a standard that you probably may or may not meet. So we know we have to do at least 6 meetings a year because of CLG, and just go from there. Again, we will bring everything forward as expeditiously as possible. However, I have to balance the workloads of all my planners, so.
And I guess I just would maybe like it to be noted, and I guess we really can't go by last year because it was an anomaly of a year, of
Exactly,
course, but
yes.
I know that we've discussed this a couple of different times and said we can have extra meetings if we need to so that we can move forward with some of our goals and our agendas, and then we don't. So I guess my concern is that we do start moving forward on some of these things, and I guess that's really kind of where I just want to make sure that we keep that in the forefront of our mind, that we...
So just to put a finer point on it, my department supports 5 different boards. So we're constantly meeting. I mean, in any one week, I'll have 3 meetings, 3-night meetings, just because we support so many boards. So we're constantly scrambling to keep up. But we will do our very best. And if you do want to have a special meeting, we will accommodate that at your request.
I mean, at this point in time, staff's got 2 items, on our 2021 list in which to start helping us to move forward on, which is the creation of a preservation plan and the tax ordinance, get my verbiage correctly.
Tax abatement.
The tax abatement, So that element, those 2 things, obviously staff need to start getting together, and they need to bring Sydney up to speed in regards to the fun and games that is the Historic Preservation Board.
Well, I just want, for the record, just to make this point, I think we've reached a critical point in our historic preservation initiative. Lots of things are happening in our district, and I think we just need to make sure that we're staying on top of the issues and the things that are changing and happening, because unless it's reported here, sometimes we don't all necessarily know what is happening and going on and how one thing is affecting another thing. So I just want, I understand, clearly that this position in particular seems to roll, so I get it. I get that you guys are kind of hamstrung a little bit, but on the other hand, we need to make sure that we're being diligent about what's happening with the historic stuff, so.
And again, we will endeavor to bring forward items very quickly, and if there are items on your out years that we can do now, like low-hanging fruit, we will probably move those up with your approval as well. So we may be able to make adjustments given our workload. Because I already see one that probably should have been moved up, but
You're talking about our 2022
Yes,
item number 5.
Design guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Because that one's been something that you've been asking for quite a while, I recall. So that might be one that, because we're right now moving forward, which is the next presentation on the residential architectural design standards. So that might be the time to consider that as well.
That would probably be
So I
something.
don't want to promise anything right this moment, but it would seem to make sense to bring that forward.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. And we talked about that as we were trying to label these, but we felt some of them were like, couldn't all happen simultaneously a little bit, and that would just be part of the process, but.
So from a design guideline standpoint, and that there's been discussion that that's going to require a consultant, are there monies available at this point in time
Well, you
to
know, I'll
hire
have to
said
talk with our
consultant?
finance director, but yeah, it's very
Well, I have a
possible.
question as it relates to that then, Andre, because the state historic preservation grants are opening up in April. So have there been any discussions about applying for any of those grants? And I don't know, I mean, I can try to look into it for you. There might be one that would be specific to being able to hire a consultant for guidelines. So it may be something that we want to put together for that, but that's
Absolutely.
coming pretty quickly.
Yes, absolutely, and this is the time to do that. We do have a new grants administrator out of the finance department, so I'll speak with her about that
Okay.
and remind her about that so we can get on that right away.
That may be one way to get that done and it not have to come out of other funds.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it's one of those things, again, it's another task as far as the staff needs to be able to move forward. So, I mean, now we've got 3 tasks for you already, Andre, and you haven't even made it away
Well,
from the
that's
podium.
a whole nother person. Just give that to the grant writer.
Because I do recall when we discussed the guidelines, we had wanted them to be 2021, but we thought that was a little too advantageous, which was the only reason why we pushed it to 2022, if I recall.
Yeah.
Yes. So our schedule obviously, kind of adjusts based on the city council's direction. And so their direction was to move forward with our residential architectural standards so that we can get that adopted, because there's a lot of development that's occurring in the city, so we want to ensure that we do that. So it would seem that the opportune time to deal with the design guidelines for the historic district as well.
Yeah.
But you would not have known that at the time that you prepared this schedule.
And I think, if I remember correctly, when we talked about the 2022 assignment to it, we were talking about it from a funding standpoint as to whether or not we'd have to write a grant. And so I think that's part of why it was noted back at the 2022 as opposed to this year.
Yeah, that's what I recalled as well.
So if we're opportunity, the opportunity to get into the grant cycle quicker, then obviously that's what we would like to do. So,
Yeah, but that's pretty fast, so somebody would have
Well-
to get on it.
correct. So that means somebody needs to reach out to the grants writer and see what's
I will.
available. So,
And if they need any assistance, I'll be happy to try to help. So.
Thank you.
Andre, I also wanted, because when you brought up the tax abatement, I also wanted to bring up to the board, and you may or may not know this, I don't know, there is an initiative on the state level through legislature right now where they're trying to put a bill together to pass tax incentives on the state level. Currently, they don't have that. There's only the national level. But that is an initiative that is taking place currently. So I don't know if you all have heard that.
Do you happen to know the House bill or Senate bill?
I can try to get that for you.
Okay.
Because I know the state has been sending out letters that it's coming because they're asking for different entity support
Okay.
for that particular program. So I think they're really going to put a hard push on it.
all right, is there any other old business items that anybody needs to bring up at this time? Otherwise, we'll move forward with new business. All right, Andre, if you would like to address the new business item of the residential architectural standards.
Yes, thank you. So you had received in your packet the draft residential architectural standards. This document was prepared some time ago and was presented to our city council at a workshop, and we got a lot of good input from the city council members. They were very excited about moving this forward, and we have since engaged a few home builders to get their input, and they have provided some very good feedback, both from the perspective of the things that we're suggesting in there as far as cost and what it would take to implement something like this. We have not done a financial analysis of the proposed ordinance, what it does to the cost of development, but that will be part of our due diligence as we go forward and finish working on this document. So this is a very, very rough draft, but we just need to get something started so that folks could react to it and give us some feedback. We've heard from, it says, a couple of the national builders, and they provided feedback as far as their standards, what they implement as their products, as well as they give us information on their color schemes and their themes and many details that we didn't have before that we would also probably incorporate in some regard. So I just want to run through this with you very quickly, just to kind of give you a feel of this, and then you can go back and read it in greater detail. And please, there's no pride of authorship here. If you don't like it, my feelings not going to be hurt. So please, give me all the feedback that you want, because we really do value your input. So the purpose, of course, is to ensure that we have high quality, well-designed residential development. We have been challenged with lower than desired residential development within the city. I want to ensure that these standards contribute positively to the look and aesthetics of the city, and of course to promote a sense of community, and as I said, a high level of aesthetic quality to how the city looks. And we also are concerned about durability. We want to ensure that these developments use high quality construction while also addressing the visual appeal. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think they can work in tandem. You can have high quality and also good looking products. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, as always, to ensure that we protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents as we design these attractive, walkable, and sustainable communities. And sustainable is an important term because, again, when you use high quality products, it tends to last longer than the more inferior products that we have seen time and time again. Next slide, please. So this plan for architectural design standards is consistent with our strategic goals for growth management, for economic development, and for infrastructure. I think those are important goals as we move forward for these standards. Next slide, please. So a little overview, just kind of breaking out the different sections of the standards as they're written today. So the standards will regulate the following types: single-family detached and attached. So that's like townhomes, single-family detached, and now we have in this new product, the build for rent, which is kind of a new type of product coming in. They also, would be subject to this as well. We also would apply to multifamily structures, anything that's 3 or more units. So currently, we have a non-residential architectural standards, and multifamily projects are reviewed as a commercial venture. And so that's really where those are reviewed today, which is kind of an odd place currently. So we're revising that to allow it to be reviewed on the residential, since it is a residential development, even though it's reviewed as a commercial project. And then any other proposed structures that might have residential in it, again, that's going to be sort of a hybrid between the non-residential and residential, so we have to also still apply residential standards to the components that are residential, so that the residential components do look at residential if that's the ultimate intent. Next slide, please. So a little more about the overview. We've broken down into different categories. One has to do with variety. That has to do with the models themselves, the paint color, the elevations, ensuring that there is a variety and that we don't have this monotony of designs. And we will have some very specific standards about the same design cannot be across from each other or diagonally from each other to ensure that we have this non-monotony, what we call the non-monotony clause. And we do that right now, currently, as individual elements come in, but this would be a standard in all our reviews. We're also looking at exterior materials, brick, stucco, tile, cast stone, anything that's what we consider more long-lasting masonry type products. Of course, I know there's a lot of engineered products out there that provide probably even better sustainability and lasting than your typical masonry products. And again, this code is not so rigid that it would not allow for those considerations as well. One of the things that we are requiring is that at least 75% of the exterior surface is made of some sort of masonry product. Of course, another section we're going to deal with is front porches and stoops. We want to ensure that we create this sense of place and allow for the interaction between neighbors and passerbys and so on, depending on the location. If it's in a more urban area, have stoops, and that's kind of area that separates you from the street itself, but still allows you to interact. It also addresses issues such as SEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So, you know, having porches, we have the idea of eyes on the street kind of thing. So we want to encourage that. Next slide. Moving further, we're talking about garages. That's been a problem, a huge challenge for us, where you have buildings that, you know, 90% of the facade is a garage, and then there's a tiny little door on the side. And so we want to reduce that situation and provide for better massing so that the garage is not the prominent feature. And that can be done several ways, through materials or through breaking up, you know, a large garage into two smaller garages with a separation so that it doesn't have that mass feel to it. We're also looking at driveways. We've received comments on this already, and we'll probably revisit this portion regarding requiring pavers. There's a lot of problems associated with pavers in terms of durability and ability to last, because they tend to, over time, buckle. And so we may want to revisit that a bit, but just want to point out that was already in there. So that was initially one of the thoughts as to how to address the driveways. Again, we will definitely take your input as well as with the other builders. Again, of course, massing and composition of the actual buildings, requiring certain architectural treatments, again, to reduce monotony or blank walls. We're looking into like positive, negative spaces. So you have this undulation, or modulation, I should say, of surface, so there's not this blank wall. And this tends to apply more to multifamily developments than it would a single family, since they are smaller units. But townhomes, for instance, could have some modulation, so it doesn't look like a blank wall. And I'll show you a couple examples in my presentation. And then we're also looking at windows and doors, and that is to accentuate the facade with windows and doors to provide some interest, visual interest in the building. Next slide. So what you're seeing is just examples all over of what we consider architecturally interesting facades, whether it's townhomes or single-family detached units, has pronounced roof lines, has columns. The garages are set back or they're rear-loaded. So the garage is not the prominent feature of the building. Next slide, please. Then this picture shows what we do not want to see. The same type of building row after row after row. It sort of looks like a mini warehouse is going to one after the other. So we don't want to see the designs that look like this. And then you see the two bottom slides. While they are not the worst designs, the garage is the prominent feature because it's forward of the porch. And so if we can reverse that where the porch is forward of the garage, that tends to reduce that impact of the garage. Next slide, please. And on the section of multifamily structures, we are looking at, for this, it's more about the site design and the layout of the units. And so, depending on, again, where the location is, if it's in a more urban setting, probably should be oriented towards the street. And we also are looking for sort of these transitional spaces or public-private spaces between the multifamily units and the street. Vehicular parking should not be located between a public street and the building. We prefer that they be in the rear, if it's in an urban setting. If it's in a more suburban setting, then typically the parking is sort of all over the complex. But again, we try to keep it more on the interior as opposed to on the exterior of the project. Now, of course, our service areas, that's important. We need to carefully look at those designs instead of the dumpsters and all the other utilities, the things that people don't typically want to see. We need to make sure that those are accommodated in a way that's aesthetically complementary to the overall design. So certain proper screening or, to reduce that visibility of those uses. Next slide. Moving further, as far as the building design, and as I said before, we want to consider, something that's pedestrian friendly. So, and what that really means is that there's not this huge mass, but simply, maybe if it's a 3-4 story structure, it's not just a blank wall going up to the 4th level, but maybe the first 15 feet of that structure is designed in a way that's pedestrian friendly, has architectural features, because when you're walking beside a building, that's what you notice. And so we want to make sure that that's pleasing for the person walking by that structure. And again, as I said, we want to include SEPTED considerations as part of those designs to ensure that the buildings are safe and they're well lit and so on. Blank walls, as I mentioned before, is things that we want to prevent. And so we want to ensure that there's enough modulation in the wall surfaces, whether it's through pilasters or actual separation or depth in the structure, so that we have and also varying roof lines. And then finally, we're talking about materials and color. And again, we want to ensure that they complement the neighborhood if there's a theme. And we did receive comments from a couple of the home builders. They have certain themes that they advocate in their different projects, so we will look at that. We don't necessarily want to mandate a particular color, but we will probably give an options to consider, because color is always a hard thing to legislate. Of course, we don't want fluorescent colors. I think that those are a bit jarring, and so those are ones that we would probably prohibit. And of course, as I said before, some long-lasting materials, which is something that's consistent throughout both for residential and for non-residential, single-family units. Next slide, please. So this is some kind of idea of what we're talking about as far as the modulation, different roof lines, porches, pronounced window treatment, different, surfaces that kind of gives some visual interest. And then you also see, there's that sort of the defensible space from the sidewalk, sort of a knee wall landscaping, kind of separate the private space from the public space, meaning the sidewalk. So those are things that we would look for. Comments that we received on this had to do more with accessibility, because if you have these knee walls or these elevation changes, that becomes a challenge for individuals that are handicapped. So we got to consider how we address that as well, because we can't require it for everything, but we have to figure out ways to allow for handicap access as well. It has to be all accessible developments. And then I think the final slide is what we would prohibit. Blank walls, large, massive structures with no interest except windows after windows after windows, and we don't want that. So these are just, exaggerated bad examples of what we would not want to see.
Yeah, they have such lovely shutters that will only close for a small portion of their windows.
But those aren't even operable shutters.
Correct.
They're just decorative. So that'll be a problem. So anyway, so that's all I have to present on architectural standards. And again, as said, we are moving this forward and we will have a revised draft, but we're taking a lot of input right now, and we'll probably take more input for probably next month, just to give people enough time to digest it, and then we'll start compiling everything and then working further. I have a schedule, I just didn't bring it with me, the pro schedule, but we want to have it done in July, August of this year, so it's moving fast, pretty quickly as far as that goes, because it's been sitting for almost a year, and now we're picking it back up, so.
Do you have any public planning sessions that you normally do where they give feedback, or do we not have?
Well, that's what we did with the city council.
already did
We
that.
already had a workshop with the city council, got public input, and then we've actively sought out more comments. So we've actually approached different national home builders that are local in this area, that work in this area, say, hey, we have this draft, could you give us your feedback? And we've gotten quite a few already, so.
I bet you have.
And these standards will apply to the entire city?
That is correct, and will also apply to outside of the city, because if you recall, the city has a joint planning area, so we also plan extraterritorially for areas outside of the city, because ultimately those will be annexed into the city, and so we want to ensure that whatever is outside of the county would also conform to these standards, or consider, because we have to provide water and sewer, so as part of our standards, we would enforce those standards as
So
well.
how does that part work, Andre, if the county is approving them, currently, if that's in an area? How do you plan to get them to assist you in that?
Oh, well, we do that now. We have a pretty good relationship with the county as far as that goes. We do coordinate. I actually meet with county staff monthly at the staff level, and then we also meet monthly at the administration level, and we discuss joint efforts, and we provide a water and sewer agreement for areas that are outside the city limits, that are not contiguous to the city limits.
Right.
And so in that document, we can impose provisions such as parking and setbacks and things like that. And we've done that consistently now for the past several years since it was first implemented, and we will continue to do that. So this will just be another add-on to
So
those
you feel
provisions.
like that they would kind of go along with this plan?
I think they would. Again, we will get their feedback and input as well. I mean, they'll be part of the process.
And there's a fair amount, as far as in reviewing this, that the county already has in place as far as their expectations for subdivision standards. So this isn't something that's new to the county. The county's actually been enforcing some of these elements, especially the non-monotony element with the facades having to be, moved around so that they're not mirrored or directly across from one another.
Well, now you need them to get to agree to not put so many units per acre.
Good luck with that.
There are different schools of thoughts on that, but
Yeah.
we won't go into that tonight.
So
A lot
the
of
other
discussion.
question that I have kind of lends to Tony's point about this being all-inclusive to everything in the city. How do you feel this translates, Andre, into like the historic district? Do
Well-
you think that kind of one-size-fits-all is going to work, or?
No, and that's why I wanted to start looking at the Historic Preservation District design standards now while we're doing this, to make sure that we're addressing it, because I think a lot of things that we're doing now has to be context sensitive. We're working on major corridors overlay with respect to uses, and depending on the part of the city, will have a different flavor, and so we want to try to customize it as much as we can without, going crazy with too many customizations, but we also want to give that flexibility. And so, if we're dealing with the Historic Preservation District, there's a set of standards that applies in that district. If there's the MAC overlay, for instance, that has its own set of design standards. So we try to customize based on the location as well. So we have the historic grid, we have the lakefront, so it depends on where it is.
So how do you see that portion moving forward? With us, it's just our design guidelines for the historic district, but how are you going to that's a lot of work.
Right, it is. And that's why we are going to get back to the shop and reevaluate how we proceed. But I think it's quite important that we do this design standards for historic preservation at the same time that we do the architectural standards. I think it's important that we keep them in tandem.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the historic aspect needs to be addressed more than what it is now, which is the only place that it's in is in the exemption. That, once we have the standards created and approved, then those would apply. My concern and what I want from all the other members is to address it from that historic viewpoint. We have a historic district which has been defined by the CBD, central, our central business district, basically. But we have a lot of historic homes that fall without that. As Andre mentioned, was basically our historic grid. And so I would want that kind of, definitely an overlay that's going to be talking about that, because there's a difference between new subdivision design, to which this is really focused on, versus infill of an existing grid, which we have a very large area of. So when we talk about that, I would definitely, even without the historic preservation ones, I would probably say we definitely need to have some breakout area that's dealing with the historic grid and infill.
Right.
Because from a standpoint of materials, materials are great for what's being stated for brand new development, because it fits with what most of the national home builders are doing. However, from an infill standpoint and from a affordable housing standpoint, we're missing a lot of materials that are used that are still considered to be acceptable from a Florida building code and hurricane standards, and that are historically used, which is wood, which has not been noted to be that. So those are things that I would say from a historical standpoint we need to think about.
Absolutely, yes. Again, the Historic Preservation District already has some specific requirements that prohibits us, putting odd materials on historic buildings. So we'll definitely add a section that's sensitive to those requirements in here. But that, of course, will work in tandem, as I said, with a very specific design guidelines for the historic district itself.
Correct.
But can that float out, and I think Richard was alluding to this, can that kind of float out of our boundaries for the historic district into, for example, we have a lot of residential historic homes that are, contiguous to the district, that we can apply that for?
And I think, I guess I'm not clear. So your historic preservation boundaries is going to set a set of standards. Those standards will still apply to historic buildings that are outside of the district. And that's where the architectural standards, the residential standards would kick in. In other words, you have your design standards for the district, but then whatever provisions are in that district that protects the historic structures would also apply to buildings that are outside of
So that's where we would go back to the inventory report
Yes.
to identify those.
But I guess what I was saying also, because the idea of a historic district, your infill, you want to be compatible, and to just bring in strictly masonry structures into neighborhoods that already have a mix and historically have had a mix. I wouldn't want to see it get overloaded just because of a design standard that didn't necessarily take that into account.
Yes, I envision, just based on this conversation, that we'll have a historic preservation section of the residential architectural standards that speaks to those concerns that you're raising, and then in addition to that have a separate design guidelines for the actual district. So if it's infill and it's in the historic district, there's a set of standards. If it's a building that's outside of the district, but probably could be considered contributing for whatever reason because of its historic nature, would also ensure that the correct materials would be applied there.
Did anybody else have any comments? And have you had a chance to read through it a little bit, I guess, and to give Andre comments at this point, or you can obviously give them to him at any
Yeah, I can
point?
give it at any point.
You mentioned that some of the national builders were consulted. Were any of the local builders consulted on this design standard?
Well, I reached out to the national builders. I reached out to a couple local, yes, but I can reach out to more. I can reach out to you and
Okay.
others, yes.
Because they seem to play more of a role in the historic district, so I was just curious about that. But,
Yes, we will reach out. We will get the inventory of all the local builders.
Okay.
Probably.
Mr. Anderson, I like the idea of an overlay district. It is a way of defining the area and providing a vehicle to work with that provides a roadmap of the expectations for that area. And changes can be made to that overlay district from time to time that are easier to change than changes to the entire district itself.
I mean, my other question is quasi-historic, and that just in regarding to looking at windows and doors. The only place you have a percentage that you mentioned is on a side. You know, you have a 30% requirement for glazing on the first third of a side. You don't really define what your expectations are from the front facade from a standpoint of the percentage for fenestration.
Okay.
I guess what I would suggest would be to review some of the historic architectural types to get a feel for what that percentage of fenestration is as far as doors and windows, to see if maybe 30% is too high from a residential standpoint. The other comment that I would have in regards to that item on the 30% glazing on the first third on the side, since it to be that's not indicating a side that's facing a right-of-way. So on a residential structure, I would be a little bit concerned because typically your setbacks aren't going to vary enough to really expose that. And from a SEPTED standpoint, there may be functional reasons why not to meet that glazing requirement of 30%, because that's a pretty good size window, and depending on what's happening in that first room, if you will,
Sure.
it may not be advantageous to have that glazing in that point. So it may not necessarily need to be specific to glazing, but maybe more into architectural detailing that you're wanting to see.
Correct, yes.
But otherwise, thank you for bringing it forward, and I'll share it with my colleagues, and they'll talk to their clients and get you a little more feedback.
You know, again, I also ask that you all, anyone that you know you need to get a copy, please forward it on as well, and ask for their feedback, and we will make an effort to reach out to the local home builders.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
No other questions for Andre? Thank you, Andre, very much for the presentation on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any other new items of business that anybody needs to bring forward at this time? All right. Absent of that, we'll open the floor to public comment. I don't know, just haven't seemed to get a big crowd lately. Absent anyone there, individual board comments. We can start at my left and to go around. Tony, did you have any?
Yes, I have a question. Mr. Anderson? Sorry, you have to come back up.
She's just getting you your exercise for the day.
Yes. This is my question is really out of your wheelhouse, but since you're at a top level in city government, I'll ask, and maybe you know the answer. Do you know what the city council decided to do with the proposal to do some kind of a trail along Florida Avenue?
So I was at the meeting. We held a public session. The consultant did, and this project, by the way, is from the Parks Department. So Stephanie Holcamp, who's the director, would be the best person to answer the question. But I know that the council is moving forward with the alternative that has the trail running down the middle of Florida Avenue, kind of meandering through the trees to preserve as much as possible. At this point, there were 3 alternatives, and I think it might be an alternative B, but don't quote me on that, but it's one that meanders.
Okay, meandering. I'll have to get a hold of Stephanie.
Yes.
I'm actually on that same board,
Okay.
the Parks and Rec Board. We actually discussed that at our meeting last one, and that is the plan that they went with. They're going to scroll through that, and I believe they said it was going to be like a 10-foot gap, but they're going to keep that in the middle, and then it's going to be just the walkthrough. That's exactly what we discussed
Yeah,
last time.
well, that's too bad. In my opinion, there's no need for that trail to go across 192. There are nobody that rides their bikes on that part of 192. I mean, on Florida.
Sure they do, but they're not doing it legally.
They actually said they're not, it's not going to go across 192. I know that the hope was when we discussed it at the last board meeting that it possibly, if they were going to talk about maybe a pedestrian bridge, but that was going to be another portion that would be doing that. It wouldn't be that actual board, but they were discussing it would be a pedestrian bridge that we'd be looking at. They would not be continuing it through. That was what
It's
was
not going to go across 192. Well,
No, ma'am.
something for your board,
No,
park
ma'am.
board, to think about as people are coming down that middle part
Mm-hmm.
of the boulevard and going to go across the side streets of the state streets. There are going to be little kids on bikes coming across and cars going across, and people are not going to be able to see those little kids.
And that was the concern that they had brought up as well, and they had discussed that in lieu of something crossing and encouraging that traffic, it would be a pedestrian bridge that another board would be.
Across each state street?
No, ma'am, across 192 that you're talking about there.
No. You're not seeing my picture.
Tony, I'm not trying to do much, but I mean,
Actually,
since it's not really historic preservation
I
related,
know, I'll shut up.
I'm just going to say you and Bobby can talk about it after the board meeting. I want to give other people the
I'll call
opportunity.
Stephanie.
I was just trying to confirm what Andre said was true. That's all.
I'm the thorn in your side,
trying to be
Richard.
helpful.
No,
Admit
I'm just trying to keep things on track. Member Lamont, did you have any comments?
No.
All right. Paula?
No, I just wanted to let everyone know that Main Street is currently in the process of doing a historic documentary. We've been videoing this week, and we'll be continuing to video the end of the week to put that together. The viewing, it will be a ticketed item to begin with for April 19th. And then once we premiere that, it will be made available to the city and to some of the entities to put that on their websites and out on their Facebook pages. But it's built around the 2 new estate markers, the one at Mount Peace Cemetery and the one at Fisk Funeral Home. Also, the National Register designation, which the plaque was just unveiled last night for the Women's Club / Heritage Museum, and the new historic mural that is on Handyman Hardware's building. So we're creating all of this to, number one, COVID kind of moved everything in a whole different direction. So we didn't do the normal unveiling ceremonies for any of them, but we thought this was an opportunity to put something together that had a shelf life for us.
Great.
And use as a promotional material. So that's kind of moving forward on some of our historic sites.
I look forward to seeing that. Sorry, I'm going to have to remember Urban.
I just would like to say that I am very thankful to have the opportunity to serve on this board and look forward to working with you all. And just to add on to Paula's point, we're very excited for this documentary, and make sure to be on the lookout for the tickets because it's going to be good. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Member Bryant?
I'm good.
No comments? And our last member, Member Day?
No comment.
All right. Well, our next meeting is Tuesday, May 11th at 6 PM. And if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.